I love having a list to work down through. What does that say?
That's twice, Kevin. Yes. Got you to speak last week and this week too. Things are working.
Be careful what you wish for, Paul.
We've got the right number combination. It's just not in the right combination. But anyway, 8471. Love it. Okay. So in terms of the upcoming schedule, so what we're doing is I've realized from the feedback that we're getting, we've sort of got two communities that are attending these webinars. There's those of you who have become real regulars and what I call our ID celebrities, the people that are really getting a lot of value out of coming along every week, both to learn, but also to contribute. And we have a lot of fun. It's been great getting to know you all. And I know how much that's, been really helpful to you as we go through this challenging year. So there's that community that love the regularity and the consistency of the webinars. And I think there's some people that just want to pop in more as and when there's a topic or there's something on that's really more juicy for them. And so what we've done is once a month, have a celebrity webinar, where I'll get somebody to come in as a speaker or as someone I'll interview live. And as you can see, coming up, not next week, but the week after, the week of that's October 7 in the US and 8 in Australia, I've arranged for Jesper Anderson, who is the CEO of Infoblox, and you'll love this guy. He's just an awesome human. They're doing some great things, and he's got a really great perspective on leadership. 3737 is his ID. And so I'll be interviewing Jesper and recording that on that particular webinar. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of people and new people that come along to that one. And then in between, we'll sort of revert back, I'm sure, to our regular ID community, the people that just want to keep learning and picking up the nuances and are really both passionate and fascinated about ID. And then we'll go again on October 28 and 29 with Craig Alexander, who'll give us a different perspective. It's still around leadership, but from an athlete sports perspective. And the thing I love about sport is there's so many analogies that you can use in business in terms of results orientation and the speed of getting results. And, Craig is to be 5 times world Ironman or world champion in the Ironman code is a really big deal. So I'm sure you'll love meeting and hearing from Craig as well. So that's going to be the rhythm. Is once a month we have someone that we interview with a different perspective, and then in between we'll have a regular sort of learning, what a lot of us refer to as our old Friday trainings, where it's like the nuances of being able to just share with each other from the experiences that we're having each and every week. So that's the rhythm. So keep in mind, 2 weeks time, Jesper Anderson, and you'll see some publicity. What we're going to do is in our marketing now, we're just going to, in the in-between weeks, we'll just market the webinars to the people that come every week. And then we'll spend the month virtually doing a build-up of marketing, highlighting the speaker that's coming in that month. So that it's a way of hopefully appealing to new people coming along. All right. So the ID survey I mentioned at the end, I think that's right, Ian. It's just a link we're going to send to everyone that's on the call. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, Paul. I'll actually put it in the chat so anyone can pick it up there, but I'll also send it out, the emails we send to everyone after with the recordings. I'll put it there just in case you missed it. So there'll be a couple of opportunities to grab it. Okay, great.
Thanks, Ian. All right, and by the way, just out of courtesy, we will keep you posted on what the results of that process show as well. So, all right, demonstrating peak performance. So all of you have seen, I'm sure most of you, unless you're new, and I know we do have a few new people on the call today. This is our peak performance indicator. And let me do this as if we're a team. And I thought what we might do today is I'm going to do it sort of more live with you. So when we do this, we explain the context of the graph to say that the green arrow here is you in stride. This is you when you're at your best and you're being true to your ID, true to your instincts. When you are in stride, you get the things at the top of the chart. But and that is our natural orientation. Left to our own devices, that is how we want to operate. But there are various forces that can pull us off track, even inadvertently, like parents who just try to save you from making the same mistakes that they made for themselves, and therefore trying to coach or guide and even love you into a different way of operating, but it may not necessarily be true to who you are. And when you get pulled off track, you not only miss out on the things at the top, but you experience the things along the horizontal axis here that increase in intensity depending on how far you're being pulled off track. So the question is, if on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 out of 10 being right in the middle here, flying up the middle, you're really in the zone, in stride, in flow, as people say, but you might be a lower number if you pulled off track. What's your number today? So there is a number that comes into your mind, and we can try and wrestle with the number as to why is it like that. But I'd say just accept whatever the number is that's resonating for you today. And what I'm going to do is, what we can do online, if you wanted to do this, if you had like a remote team, you can fairly easily do a pulse, and you can get people to comment. What I'm going to just ask is to do it in this group. Is there anyone that's a 10? Just comment if you're a 10. Just make sure you're off mute. Okay.
I first thought an 8 when you said 10, and I went, sure. So I don't know which one to believe.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, anyone who's a 9?
I'm a 9.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, I'd say I'm a 9 today. At least a 9, maybe even a 10. I feel really in a great place. Great. So we've got 1 9. Anyone who's an 8?
Yep, that'd be
Tracy's
me.
an 8. David's an 8. Doug's an 8. Vic's an 8.
Me.
Yes.
Anna's an 8.
Leonie.
Leonie, awesome. So the place you want to be is 8, 9, or 10. Is there anyone that would be like a 4, a 3, 2, or 1? Okay. So it seems like we had a lot of 8s, and then I guess there might be some 7s and 6s. So you can just go around and ask the number, and then, you know, ask if people want to share. Now in Link Up, we have a protocol that if someone is a 7 or below, they share what's going on, just so that the team understand. You know, it's not for anyone to get judged or anything like that, but it's just some people said, look, I've got something going on personally. It doesn't affect work. It's not anyone in the team. It's just something I'm cleaning up. I just need a few more days. I've just had something going on, and I'll be back, you know, back on track. It's like, okay, good to know. Thanks for sharing. We don't necessarily know the detail, but we just know that there's something going on, and you know to be a little more careful or sensitive with that person. On the other hand, if someone's a 10 or they were a 7 last week and they're a 9 this week, it's great to understand what might have shifted for them to help them get up to that score. So it's not just the score that's important. It's the conversation around the score. And there are times when this exercise can take, you know, just a few minutes. And there's times when it can be unpacked and you can actually just sit there with the team and have a really good conversation. Next thing, 20 or 30 minutes have gone by. You will, of course, get some people saying to you, well, hang on a sec, do you mean my score to do with work, or do you mean my score to do with home? Like, how do I figure out the score? You know, that's often the verifiers are, of course, wanting to get it exactly right. But you can just say to them, well, you can have a score for all of those situations. You choose the score you want to contribute today. Like, it doesn't really matter to everyone. It's your score, what's important to you. And just sometimes even realizing the score provokes people to do something about it. Or realizing that you're a 10 or a 9, it's like, wow, that's great. What am I doing or what have I been doing that's got me into that place, you know? And it's just good to realize those things yourself. Does anyone have anything they want to share about their score today? Particularly if it's shifted for you, up or down. Nope. Okay, Kevin, just go off mute before you share.
I'll keep it quick. Thanks, Paul. I'm presently 7. When I joined this group last week for the first time, I was probably somewhere less than 7. And I'm happily heading up the scale finally. Seeing the chart is really helpful here because it's okay when I see serious emotional health issues way out on the side as high stressors. That's actually helped me a whole lot, just glancing at that, because it's okay to be wallowing a little bit at the minute. And I'm happy to dig in a little bit, but I'll leave it there. But yeah, there's been a bunch of serious stuff that's gone on in the last 3 months.
Okay.
So there's a quick share.
Well, thank you for sharing. And isn't it just even helpful to realize where you are in the scale of things? You know, that it's not like I've got to stay on medication, or it's not like I don't know what's going on. When you can sort of assign it to a reason. It's like most people with a friend of mine got cancer last year, and he said the thing that's driving him nuts with it is they can't tell him why he got it. He doesn't really understand where it sort of came from. And even though they're saying it's gone, he's like, yeah, but I don't understand it. And it's the same, I think, about how your energy and performance shows up when you don't understand why you're in stride or out of stride. I remember Tiger Woods being interviewed in a golf game. This is like maybe 15 years ago. And they were talking about him being at his best. And I was walking past the television. It sort of grabbed my attention. And they said, so Tiger, how do you explain this consistency of success that you're having at the moment? And he said, well, I guess there's no real explanation. It's just everyone has their time in the sun, and this is my time in the sun. So I'm just making the most of it while I can. And I'm like, wow, that's making success nothing more than like a fluke almost. That if I do a bunch of good things, then it'll probably go really well. Now, I know from having worked with Craig Alexander that Craig can't guarantee that he's going to win every race, but he'll tell you, like, I'm going to be on that podium. Like I can't guarantee which part of the podium I'll be on, but I'll be on the podium, meaning he absolutely expects to be at the very front of that pack. And the consistency of that, and it does occur, is because he has a formula that knows exactly what he's got to do from a preparation, as well as nutrition, rest, mindset. He's got the whole thing. There's a formula to it. And I think because ID gives you a formula, even when you're a little off track, you can at least understand why you're off track. And more importantly, what you've got to do to get back on track. And that's really cool.
Actually, Paul, that's a point I was wondering about with other callers on today, was how I realize I've been using this for so long that I don't actually give myself a number, but when something's missing, and I'm going, I know I have 2 buckets to look into, my 8 and my 2, to try to put something back there. And it's so automatic that the number, I can't get off for very long because I've always something to do, or there's some movement to make. There's some way to be useful. There's some variety I can put in, whatever, how small. And I was wondering how many other people may not know their number, but they know when they're off. They know their early warning signals, and they have like a first aid kit to come back. That's what we want to leave our clients with often, is that way to come back.
They're great points, Greg. For the benefit of the group, what's the example for you of an early warning signal? Like, what's your early warning signal, for example?
A sense of wasting my time is one of a big one. Like, why am I doing this? How come I'm here? That's an internal one. An external one that you would see would be sarcasm or a dismissal. And my wife knows when I'm out of stride way before I do, right? So it's like, and so there's I call them internal warning signals, then there's external ones as well, like that I know first. If I don't listen to them, the world knows. And so feeling trapped and a sense of not being useful are big ones.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know there's someone on this call that used to say to me that when she's out of stride, the first thing she notices is swearing. She starts swearing more than. You remember that person, Trace? Yeah, for me, I sneeze twice, and it's the sign that I'm getting a cold. I can tell if my energy is really up or not, and it's normally pretty up. But if I'm off track, I'll sneeze twice, and it's an absolute guarantee that I'm going to get a cold. And I have 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C. Stay off dairy, and it disappears. And I think figuring out that it probably sounds a bit paranoid or fanatical, but I guess if being on track is about thinking of these things, and to Greg's point, understanding not just what it feels like to be on track or in stride, but what are the early indicators that things aren't quite right? Because sometimes it surprises you. You don't realize that something can be taking you off track until sort of a little further into the journey. And if you are aware of your early warning signals and just watch for them, if you don't know what they are now, and this is a new experience for you, just stay more aware. And over time, you'll figure out the little indicators that are signs that you're off track. And then you use them as sort of guardrails rather than keep, going off. You can sort of go, okay, I can correct the course now and get back in stride. And it always comes by attending to normally the strongest numbers of your ID. And if any of you want help, like and Kevin, I offer this to you, given that you were kind enough to share. If you're sitting at like a 7, you think, I want to get to an 8 and a 9, but I'm not quite sure of the nuances I need to address. please reach out to me. I'd love to help you get there, because it's the sort of thing that once you get the insight, you know, you can almost get there in some cases instantaneously. It's just like a new perspective you need, or a strategy to apply, and you can feel it straight away, and it changes you. It's like getting a phone call from someone that's exciting, and it changes your energy instantly. Or equally, you get a phone call from someone that's not so exciting, it can be, you know, very destroying. It's a similar thing with getting the right strategy to kick you into stride. So if I can help anyone with that, please reach out. It's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, let's move on with the next item on our agenda here. So the revised Avoid, Authenticate, Genius. And here's what we had before. So we had a white belt, and for each of the 8 directions, this is what we had. We had a white belt and a black belt level of genius. So the white belt level for the Avoid, Authenticate was reading the vibe, and the black belt was creating the safe space for these deeper, more vulnerable discussions. What came up yesterday was this adjustment. And that's creating the space for emotion to flow. And part of that is safe, vulnerable discussions, but it's also around happy things too, like creating the magical moments, deeper connections with people, creating that space where it becomes much more emotional. And I was interested to just hear from those of you who are Avoid, Authenticate, whether this resonates for you even more than what we had before. Who have we got that's Avoid, Authenticate? We don't have many people who are Avoid, Authenticate. That's hilarious. We've got Marie and Pam and Grant, sort of, kinda, you know, like you guys aren't that strong in it, but I'm just interested. So other than that, we've got a lot of 5s and then Authenticate people. So maybe you have to test with a different group.
So Paul, I can comment on this. I'm just a 4. However, I do recognize that when I go to share, there is the feeling behind it.
Yeah.
I want you to know how I feel.
Yeah. Always.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious, as you as a 1, that must be.
Well, for me, it's all about the emotion, you know, but it's I mean, Greg shared the story from years back of where we were talking about this lady, or this girl, actually singing a national anthem. To Greg, it was singing national anthem, and to me, it was all the emotion around it, you know, for not just the girl herself, but her parents, the grandparents that are probably watching, the people affected in the audience. You know, it was all around the emotion. And we were talking yesterday about even when someone gives you a gift, you know, for me, the gift is almost irrelevant. It's all the thought and the emotion and the care and everything else that went in around it. It's not about whether I'm even going to use the gift. It's almost over by the time I've received the gift, or for that matter, given the gift. You know, it's if someone gets the gift and goes, "Oh, great, thanks." I'm like, "Oh, you've missed where all that came from." You know, there's like so much thought and whatever that's gone into that, or not. I mean, there's times when it might not have that in it, but for the most part, if it's someone that I really care, there's, you know, a lot of emotion. So it's creating the space for the emotion to flow, or creating the environment, you know, like if it's a party or a dinner with friends, or even just the giving of gifts. It's all around the sharing of emotion.
Well, I had an interesting example from this morning, that now that I'm paying attention, like I know one of my daughters is an 8 and one I don't know, she's 9, but I know she's Avoid, Authenticate. And one read to me like a report she was writing for class, which was about like a thank you letter to firefighters, right? And so the 8 in Authenticate is like, thank you so much for risking your life and for everything that you do, and the impact, you know, like it was all about what they were doing. And she was reading it to me, and my little one was listening, and she goes, you should probably add something about like how they leave their family and their kids to go save people's lives, and how hard that must be for their family and their friends. And then you should probably talk about, and she just went on about all this like emotions of how all these people would be feeling. And I was like, oh, that's a really good example, right? And like, She was like, you're missing the whole point of what they're doing.
Right. Well, Trace, when we were talking yesterday, you might be worth sharing with the team what was happening for you around things like presence, because it was even for you as our very first black belt, it was still really enlightening for you, right, to get that dimension on it.
Well, I think if I share in context, it may even, I'll be curious for someone like Greg or Doug or, Richard, all that have been around for a long time who use Authenticate. The context that came up was like when you were planning, like if you were going to miss a memorable event, how you would handle that. And you'll see this in the questionnaire. So hopefully I'm not leading the witness, but you guys all know ID pretty well anyway. And how it was like, my reaction was like, what can I still do? How can I help? How can I still play my role? And like Paul and Ian kept talking about like, how do we make this magical? And how do we make this memorable? And how do we make it? And I'm like a pretty empathetic, like emotional person. So I try to make things special, and I have 3 girls and but just the way that you were doing it was so different, because it was like, how is it memorable? And how is it magical? And I'm like, I just don't think of those words. I'm like, what am I going to do to make this fun? Or what am I going to do to make this impactful? And it was just like a different level of emotion behind it. And again, my little one has been pulling me aside for days, because my twin's birthday is on Friday. And the 9-year-old who's Avoid Authenticate keeps pulling me aside, like, we have to plan this. How are we going to make this special? What are we going to do? And she's like, I'm like, what are we going to feed them? And she's like, no, there's a treasure hunt. And when they get there, they're going to do this. And like, it's so much more like, when I hear her, I'm like, oh, she's trying to create this experience, that's really special and memorable. And I just was like, listening to you and Ian, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to think more like that. Like, I think it'll add a different level of depth to how I approach things that I make fun and special. It'll add a different level of depth. So that was my example from yesterday.
Thanks, Trace. Thanks for sharing.
Paul, as Tracy's talking, and this thing you're reading here about creating the space for emotion to flow, for me, it's for it to flow for me, not for you. You authenticates, you're already there. You Avoid authenticates, and it's almost like the iceberg metaphor we use, where I'm seeing the top of the iceberg, and yeah, that's all there is. And you're taking me with some scuba gear down and going, and I'm seeing all the different lights and all the different colors, and I kind of would have known were there, but now I'm seeing them. In this case, feeling them. And so you guys don't create the space just for you. You create the space for the rest of us, 5s and above, to go, oh, that's also here. And I think that's the magic that comes out for me. That's the black belt. I'm down under the water, and I'm looking at the iceberg behind. Sorry for the metaphor. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. That's really good. Thanks, Greg.
Yes, as a use authenticate, I think we really suffer from the avoid authenticators. They come against us in terms of our surface dwelling, and really they tend to shut down with us because we just can't see below the surface, and they really would. It's a big gift giving us the insight, because I'm sure we shut them down because we just cruise on the surface, and they think, oh well, I won't bother with that guy. He's just skimming the surface. And I've got a son who's Avoid Authenticate, and he's almost as dry as I am emotionally, because I think he just says, oh well, we'll just keep to the basics here. Anyway, that's my intake on the use.
Thanks, Doug. Anyone else got anything else they want to comment on?
Hey, Paul, just, I guess, 2 examples for me. I don't know, I'm 4, but it's interesting. A couple of reflections I've had in the last couple of years in my various roles at work is I'm more fearless with sharing vulnerable life experiences with the teams that I work with.
Yep.
And how I rationalize might not be the right word, but how I describe that internally is I much prefer to deal with the fear of sharing, knowing that I'll be giving value and opportunity So I much prefer to give value and opportunity than be overcome with the fear of sharing. And how I see that play out is the teams that I've been part of where I have been willing to share, and I certainly wasn't strong at this when I was early in my career, is it then opens a space for the rest of the team to do the same. And for a lot of people, they've never had that experience before. So that's I guess on a level that I experience where I share it with people. And another example for me that is very much driven by a feeling and emotion is my sense of connection to the US. It started well before moving here. The one thing that I love and that I guess allows me to see through all the crap that is going on over here at the moment is the sense of pride and commitment to the national anthem and the flag. There is just something astounding about being at a sporting event when they play the national anthem and they've got the flag on the big screen and just everyone is just so committed to the cause. And you can feel the sense of emotion and pride in that particular moment. And that to me is the reason I love the US.
Yeah, I love that too.
It's just amazing. Such an amazing feeling.
So always remember, one of our sayings is vulnerability builds rapport. So when you share, it just is a myth that other people will be laughing at you. What actually happens is it's like you, as particularly as a leader, you set the temperature for where everyone else is able to share as well. And so exactly as you said, Grant, when you share, if you share like at a vulnerability level of a 6 out of 10, they'll meet you at a 6 out of 10. If you share at a 10 out of 10, they'll share at a 10 out of 10. And so when we do the peak performance indicator, if this is a little insight for you, if we're going around the room and we ask for people to share and we pick the leader first and the leader is not willing to be vulnerable, it screws it up for everybody else. So if I know the leader is in a sensitive situation, I'll start somewhere else where I can detect that, that person's likely to be honest. And by them sharing at an 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10, you can feel the room go, oh, okay, so this is how we're going to play. And no one's laughing. Everyone's like, okay, well, I'll share that too. And I can see people who would have, it's just my intuition, who would have given a more safe number previously, but when they see the vulnerability is okay, they share more truthfully and they'll open up about it. So I think as a leader, when leaders say to me going into a workshop or whatever, so is there anything you want me to do? And I'm like, yeah, I want you to be totally vulnerable and I'm going to take you there. So please be ready for that, and they're all good with it, but it's actually normally a big surprise. And in fact, there were a bunch of us on a call last week, like my link up team. We're on this call doing some, work with an outside supplier, just on research and development. And we were just having what we thought was a really open, honest, normal conversation. And at the end of it, that person commented on, wow, you guys as a team, you're amazing how vulnerably you talk. And we're like, really? We weren't being vulnerable. We were just being real. We were just saying what we would normally say. But it was a little disappointing that it stood out so much. I'm like, well, what the hell do other people talk about then if they're not talking about this stuff, So it was sad for me that it stood out. But I guess that's why we have a job to help other people be able to have those real conversations. And I think a big part of the work we do, yes, it's about insight and people understanding each other, but really the sort of the journey of that is to help people then have the real conversations that they would otherwise sort of avoid or somehow distort, So yeah, thank you, Grant.
Paul, can I share a nuance that I think might be obvious to everyone else, but my 7 will share it and then we'll see if it's obvious to y'all. But I think it's important, like when coaching, use authenticate. When Grant talks about sharing experiences, right, and being vulnerable, I think the way that an avoid authenticate shares experiences is by sharing emotions often, how they felt and what that was like. And I think you could tell me to share an experience, but you almost have to coach me differently, like to share the emotional experience. Because if you told me to share an experience, I would say, oh my gosh, it was so hard and this is what we did. And it would be about the action of what I did and what happened in the story. And I'm finding even for myself, I'm having to learn storytelling in a different way because and I told, you guys this yesterday, is when the emotion comes up, I almost, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, shut up, they don't want to hear that, just tell them what happened. And I like stop telling the emotional side because I'm trying to explain the story, and I like miss the whole friggin' point. And so, and Greg's nodding, like I can see him laughing. So I think what Grant's saying, like, you really, for you use Authenticate, or those who are coaching use Authenticate, is like being explicit about it's sharing the emotions of the story, or how you felt, or the impact that it had, not just the story. Because you're gonna, like, I saw this somewhere the other day in a team where everyone was like sharing something important, and then the Authenticate went, and everyone was kind of just like, was that, but for them it was like actually really meaningful, but the avoid Authenticates were all like, it didn't land because it was a thing as opposed to a feeling, right? And it was, anyway.
That's brilliant, Trace. I mean, that's a really great clarity. So thank you for sharing that, because I wouldn't have thought to share that with the with the Authenticate community, to share the emotional side of it. So that's awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's why you're black belt, Trace.
Oh, you're gonna let me keep it then?
All right. Anyone else? So let's move on. Let's talk about this fun discussion that we were having just recently on. So, by the way, I'll revise this. I just wanted to put this up and show you. This was the slide that's up on the website for each of the drives, that came from the deep dive. So this will be a new slide that goes up showing the revised Genius element. So you'll see that if you want to go in and get that. All right, how do people fight based on their ID? So I just thought I'd throw up a couple of ideas here just to provoke it. And let me give you the context. So the one that we were chatting about was the Authenticate drive. And we were saying how avoid authenticators fight with words, but authenticators fight with weapons. Like literally throwing things, right? And or using something physical. And it was a fun discussion, but I thought it would be really interesting to unpack that for each of the drives. And I just threw up some ideas. I'm not saying these are right, but I just wanted to provoke a conversation with you. So I remember someone I know was telling me the other day that when they were a kid, they were fighting with their brother, and he even threw darts at them, like a dart that just luckily they got out of the way in time for it to miss. But, throwing something or using a weapon, something physical, can be the way that an authenticator might do it. There might be other ways as well. Whereas for avoid authenticate, I mean, it would never even occur to me to throw or get physical with something. That just doesn't, it's not, and I'm not saying that I'm any saint with that. It's just not the way I operate. It's being physical like that. But then I thought of, what happens then for the other drive. So I thought I'd just open up the discussion for a few minutes with you guys to say, so where do you go to? If you're fighting with someone, where do you go? Like I was thinking for the improvisers, what might really get to someone else is that they've got to go and talk to others, and they're the gossip mongers. And I think of a bunch of people who I know that do that, or they'll use humor, but in a like a demeaning sort of a way, poking fun at someone or making it lighthearted because they know it really pisses someone else off. I've seen avoid authenticates just stonewall somebody like for days and shut down and have no, like, the solitude that we think of for an avoid improvise is something they then use as a weapon, against others in a relationship. So just interested to hear any thoughts you might have. And I thought this might also be helpful if you resonate with anything here, just to be more aware of it. And maybe, particularly if you're in a relationship, whether it's with significant other or other family members who are different to you, just how your ways might come across to them. Who'd like to share?
Well, Paul, I've got one, and I'm married to a Use Authenticate, so I can give a real example.
Yeah.
The other day, my husband went out in the yard and he said, the lemon tree is dying because it's not getting enough water. It didn't get watered. So I'm the one that waters.
Right.
So when I hear that, I immediately attach a meaning to it. It isn't just about that the plant didn't get watered. It's that I did something and there's more meaning to me not doing it and all that. And that will really cause a conflict immediately.
So what would you call that, Pam?
I would just call that a miscommunication. I'm hearing it differently than the intent. I'm misreading the intention.
Okay.
And he's just stating something, and there's really no meaning to it other than the real thing that he sees in front of him, which is the plant's not getting water and it's dying.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So somebody didn't do something properly.
Okay.
And then I threw the lemon tree at him. No, I didn't.
Now, but I can see someone being physical about it. Like if they knew someone cared about something, they go and destroy it because they thought, look, it's physical, you know, to be destructive. Maybe that's another word, is being destructive, physically destructive. Anyone else? What do you do when you fight? I even wonder whether there are some IDs that just don't fight, like whether the avoid authenticate just doesn't, you know, whether it's which to not fight, does that fuel things? You know, I don't know. Des, you were going to share something? Might just need to go off. You raised your hand, so I don't know whether you want to share something.
Paul, David here.
Yes, David.
I guess I just don't believe in fighting. I'm not that sort of person. And probably I use humour. If I was going to fight on something, I would try to, I don't know, I'd probably use, if there was a fight looming, I'd try to use humour to calm the situation down. But I try to use humour to excite. I try to use humour a lot to excite a situation, to inspire people, to relax people, etc. But I guess, yeah, I don't really believe in fighting with somebody. Yeah, just not me.
Okay. Thanks, David.
David, it's interesting when you said that, because I know somebody who's a 9 in improvise and they feel the same way, right? They're like down 5, down up, so similar style. But it's interesting because if they're going to say something negative, which isn't very often, they start with, it's really funny because, and then they tell me a story and it's actually a criticism, but even the criticism, and they don't realize they're doing it. Like every time it happens, I'm like, oh, I know. Every time they say, oh, it's really funny. And I'm like, oh, here comes some sort of criticism. But it even starts with them saying it's funny, which relates back to your humor. So even when they're criticizing, they're saying it's funny when it's not. Like whatever comes next is not actually funny.
Thanks for that, Tracy. I'll take that on board.
It's really funny. See what comes after.
Paul?
Yeah, Marie.
Yeah, this is not a personal one, but I love this one example from, it's quite a few years ago, when Tom was a lot younger and he had a business with his mate. So Tom's ID is 2747 for everyone. And I remember they were having a lot of arguments and, you know, we were having all these problems between the two of them. And Tom used to get bombed all the time with, you know, the other guy would just win all the time. But I remember because it was a time when everybody was texting more, like, you know, we didn't always text all the time. And it was sort of coming in more, certainly. And Tom, I remember Tom, he came to me and he said, I can win a text fight. And the thing was, he knew a quick answer. He could have it concise. You know, there was just so many things about his ID that worked where he didn't feel all the confrontation. He could do it very fast. But anyway, it was just one of those funny things. But I had a look at the feed. It was very good.
A proud mama.
Yeah.
My boy can fight. Yeah. Thanks, Marie. Thank you. Good to hear that. Say hi to Tom for me. I just, as you said that, I wonder whether he's listened to the avoid, verify work we did on the deep dives. It might be really helpful for him if he hasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he hasn't, but yeah.
Everyone I know that's a strong avoid verifier got a ton out of that particular session. So
yeah.
I saw Des, just to call out Des, who's on the call here, but isn't able to unmute her connection. She just shared in the chat, if people haven't seen it, she said, so she's 3764. I generally avoid fighting, but if someone insists on having a fight, I obliterate everything in the environment without regard of my own safety. It's interesting, isn't it?
Wow.
So I've added, the other thing I would add as a verifier when I'm fighting is blame. You know, blame is something that comes up very instinctively for a verifier.
As in blaming someone or taking the blame?
Normally it would be blaming somebody, you know, I hate it about myself. Like if I walked in and couldn't find my car keys, the first thing is like, who took my freaking car keys, you know? And I could be the only one there and there's still someone else, like some ghost has come in and taken my car keys. But it's annoying to me, more than annoying, it's like a really, small part of me that I hate it. I hate that's the first instinct. And because I know it, I can consciously shift, but I hate that it's my first instinct, because there's times when your instinct just shows up in front of people like first, you know, and everyone can see what you're thinking, even if you don't say it. Like it's so obvious, you know. So all right.
Sorry.
Anyone else got anything that stands out to you listening to this?
Hey, Paul, it's Grant. Similar to you, I find that as well, and I find that a frustration as I get to understand my drive more deeply is that natural instinct to blame, and it's just about with anything and everything. It could be road rage, it could be the lost keys, it could be anything. The other thing I find myself doing is I argue through questioning. So I will literally keep questioning and questioning and questioning with really barbed, harsh questions that just dig into people. And it's to the point of just wanting to obliterate them. Like, you know, and I know I'm probably talking it up a bit. I don't argue a lot, but I find that if I want to get on the offensive, I do it through questioning. Really, really strong questions.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really, that's sort of really.
Sorry, Paul. Just as you were saying, Grant, I find that I just want evidence that what someone's saying. So if I'm having a fight with my husband, I just want him to give me an example of when I did something like that. Just give me more examples so I can verify that what he's saying is true. And then if that's the case, then I'll take on board criticism. But I need to be questioning someone as to why you're saying that about me, so that I can then see some examples and go, all right, okay, that makes sense or not. And I think that might be the verify, but I don't usually fight. Usually if I'm hurt or if something goes on or if there's a heated discussion, I just go silent and I just stay on my own, and it might be for a day or more. And I'll only really fight if someone really provokes me or just really keep pushing me, and then you can not be very nice, but usually I'll just go really silent.
I'm interested, for those of you who are avoid improvise, what do you do other than silence? I've seen the silence, like the shutdown. It's almost like an emotional stonewalling where you can literally sort of carry on for days almost, you know, like of not having anything to do with someone. Is that the most common thing, or are there other things that you do that you'd really resonate more with?
It's Leonie here. I think it's hard because I'm a big conflict avoider, and so often it's hard to analyze what I actually do, because there's a lot of times when I'm trying not to be involved in conflict, but removing yourself from the situation. So not just about the stonewalling silence, but actually yeah, physically and in every other way, removing yourself to try to shut it down and not engage.
I've seen do a lot of reflection as well. Just to add there, I reflect a lot on what's going on, and I think by removing myself from what's happening and going silent, it allows time for reflection on what exactly happened. And I find I need to do that process on my own, as opposed to in a conversation or in an argument with someone.
So that's a great example of, if we talk ID combinations, Amanda, of how your whole ID works together. So the one in improvise wants to remove yourself. That's the one. The 8 in verify says, okay, now that I've removed myself, I want to reflect and process this and work it through and analyze it and understand it, and your 7 in complete would want to analyze all of the parts. Like, let's go back to when this started, and let me work through everything that was said or done, so I can work through the whole thing to shift to a different place. So that's a good example of how the whole lot comes together. If you were a verify, avoid, improvise, but not a completer, you'd remove yourself, you'd analyze it, but you probably just analyze one piece of it, and if you were a completer and not a verifier, so you were like 3, I'll just make this up, like 3, 5, 7, 1, so it's just the complete, you'd remove yourself and you'd probably be able to recall and you'd feel hurt, but you wouldn't necessarily process it all and analyze it all. You'd just be aware of everything, that the whole process of what happened, and you'd be probably just using time to shift to a different place emotionally, but not necessarily analyzing everything.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so now that it's said like that, I can really see that that's what I do. And I think the complete also, I usually, that will happen, and then I'll want to go back to that person and read through what happened and put an end to it, and I'll never go back to that again. Like, it's done,
Once it's done for you, I know with one of my kids, it's a 3 in verify. If I go back to him, he said, Dad, every time you raise this topic, even if it's like the next time, it's like my wound was healing, and by you raising it, you just scratched it off again, and it's starting to bleed again, So time is a healer for avoid verifiers, like the wound starts to heal, and every time you raise it, and I think that's a great thing for a verifier to be aware of. If you're in relationships with avoid verify people on these, from a fighting or a disconnection point of view, is you want to find a way then to deal with it and reconcile it without necessarily having to go back and raise it with the other person. Because even if you're not blaming them, even if you're just sharing what you learned from it, the raising it again brings it back up to the surface and causes the wound to reopen for the avoid verifier. Very cool to know, isn't it? And I would also add, given how different your husband is to you, just even share with him what you're realizing today about this. If you just say, look, when I remove myself, I'm still in our marriage. So this is a process I go through to be able to get back into our marriage. I'm not running away from you. I'm just taking care of myself to be able to come back and be whole again, So when people who are different to you then understand what you're doing, it makes it so much easier for them to accept it. Whereas if they're in the dark, they can imagine all sorts of other motives that aren't necessarily true. Sorry, Richard, I think I cut you off.
Thank you, Paul.
That's all right, Paul. I was relating to that, the avoid improvise thing, but I think Amanda raised the very point I thought. I keep looking at these and think it's really the whole ID. I can't sort of just look at one and say, yeah, that's sort of what I do. But I sort of do relate to what's written in each of the areas, but it'll probably be specific to what the incident is. Like even, No, I think it's been a good discussion. I agree with that.
Well, and we always work, it's always our whole ID that works together. Sometimes it's so subtle, it might even be hard to unpack it, but I know for me, for example, if I'm a verifier is asking questions, but because I'm an avoid authenticator, the types of questions I'm going to ask will be more about people's feelings, for example, or the emotion that was involved in a situation. And then as an improviser, it's about how I can take it forward. So even in the one question, It's a question that's future focused, but delving into their feelings. So the whole ID combines. They're not done separately. It's all together. But for the sake of helping people understand their ID, we unpack it like this to sort of just try and be a little more clinical or surgical about it. But when it actually plays out, it's your whole ID. Sometimes, and I saw an example the other day where even a word can represent the entire ID. Like the word was like really descriptive, like straight to the point for the, say, an authenticator, but it was a future focused word that mapped to their improvised drive. It wasn't critical. It was like an avoid, verify. Well, you know, like I could see how the one word mapped to all 4 of their drives. Okay, has anyone else got anything else they want to share on when they fight or how they react to a fight?
I was just going to jump in, Paul. Tracy reminded me to use complete. We have a tendency to do told you so. It's all that coming. Why, you know, we saw it, you know, you didn't listen. Now you've ignored me. I saw it coming.
Do that. That phrase, I can tell you as an avoid complete, every avoid complete hates
cringes.
That. And if you want to fight, you just say, I knew you were going to say that. And it's just like, I'm done. You know, either shut down or like now we're on. Yeah, we hate the thought that it was predictable.
Yep.
And by the way, it's totally not predictable. So I think that it also makes you feel like, from our point of view, it's totally not predictable. So it makes you feel like you've not been listened to as well, for people to just put you back into that category, you know? Yeah, no, it's great point.
I have to say, as a 2 and avoid complete, I really can't stand being told what to do.
Yep.
You can ask me, you can request.
Well, you just have it like it really is like an allergic reaction to it, right, Pam? I mean, that too, it is like a brat inside you. You know, I think of it as a brat because every 2 I know, no matter, and some of them are overt brats and some of them are more passive, but it's fundamentally a brat. The minute it's like a rule or a have to, it's like, nah, not doing it, not playing.
We prefer rebel.
Same, both.
I'm a brat, I admit it.
Rebel, brat. Yep, they're all in there. I feel like I'm surrounded by 2s and complete. Maybe that's the club I belong to.
Well, as a 2, I know that what I do, that a version of that is you got me on something, and then I have to find out how you do it, and make you just as bad or punish you for like the old, you cut me off on traffic. Oh, well, I'll have to go and drive in front of you and put my brakes on. There seems to be a payback that comes with that. I think it's an 8-2 combo to make it right or make it real. Like, oh yeah, cop this. And my wife and I would call it, goes, oh, you're going to punish me now. And I went, oh God, there it is again. And it changes the game, the focus back to the other person.
Hey Greg, but that's interesting because you just reminded me, the word punish, I would have thought that's an avoid improvise word. I've noticed a lot of avoid improvisers want to punish, whereas the instinct of the improvise is to reward. So even when it comes to, say, parenting, I've watched improviser parents more incentivize and reward their children to get them to do something, and the avoid improviser parent will typically punish the child for not doing something. You know, like, well, so you think?
No, Bear is a 2 and improvises. Punishing is just not right, but she's also a 4 in verify, and also it wrecks the harmony for the up complete. She's an 8 and up incomplete.
Okay.
So she's on to me quickly. She says, you don't need to punish him, you just need to educate him. You know, so I'm not. Yeah, her combination is that punishing's not productive.
Where does punishing come from for you?
It's balancing it out. It's like, well, hang on, you did this. This has to. You need to get back what you just gave. Or I think it's that sense of making even the playing field. I guess.
Okay.
It's a form of defense too. It's like takes the heat off me and go, yeah, but you do it, and let me show you. Yeah.
Okay.
This is not. I'm making these comments. Look at that. He goes, I need to want to say, I'm not proud of any of this, guys. I'm just being honest. You know, it's like, please don't think I'm bragging here. You know.
No, but I think it's good. I mean, I appreciate everyone's vulnerability. And I do know we're out of time, so we'll close in a second. But I appreciate the vulnerability. I think it's very helpful, though. We all encounter situations that when we're out of stride, you know, go back to what we're here for. We're out of stride. We're not proud of who often shows up, and it's good to be aware of if there is this sort of common element that we instinctively show up a certain way. Being aware of it, we can maybe start to do something about it. But also we're aware of how it maybe impacts other people. So yeah, I think it's good if you think of anything else and you want to share it, send me a note. I'd love to sort of put something together like a slide like this that maybe does help point people to what happens and what to be more aware of.
Paul, I'd like to just add, I'm an avoid verify, and I've noticed there it says shut down and avoid it, but I would say that it's more that I'm protecting myself if I start to get interrogated by someone else.
Okay.
And it also allows me to build my confidence again, to figure out what was theirs, what was mine, to, you know, be able to take, you know, personal responsibility, but more about then building my own confidence and then just staying centered so that I can move forward again.
Beautiful. That's a really beautiful insight. Thanks, Susan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I am aware of the time, so thank you for being on the call today. Always love these conversations and the insights that I get from you, and I hope I share back with you. Have a great rest of day and rest of week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Paul.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye, Paul.
Okay, here.